Hello.
Hello.
Make sure that's right side up. Well, I'm glad you're back. It says a lot about a person who comes back for the evening service, and I'm glad you're here. I wish more people would be back in the evening, but we pray that God would give us time to convince people how important it is to come back for evening services. Anyways, I'm glad you're here, and I hope you've had a good day. This morning, in Ezekiel class, your imagination was tested, I would say. And so I'm going to do that again, but this time it's going to be a whole lot easier, okay? So imagine visiting an art gallery, the most prestigious art gallery that's in the world. And you walk up to this beautiful, famous masterpiece. And you walk up to it and you find it displayed with utmost care and respect. Has a beautiful, elegant frame around it, and it's behind the protection of glass, and it's positioned under the perfect lighting. I mean, the lights are shining down on it. You can see all of its greatness, and it's even roped off, so no one can really approach it. You can only view it from a distance, and you still see how beautiful it is. So every visitor that comes to that art gallery and sees that masterpiece realizes and understands just how important it is, just because of the way it's presented, right? It's extremely important. It must be so valuable, and everybody appreciates its value, and they understand the need to preserve its integrity, that it needs to be protected. Now imagine coming the next day to the same art gallery because you just love the masterpiece. You got to see it again. And this time you find it ripped out of its frame, and it's placed on the floor, just kind of casually thrown on the floor, it looks like, and it's left completely unprotected. And you can tell because of the way it is now presented, people have been touching it, spilling things on it, stepping all over it, etc. Can you see how the lack of boundaries and the lack of protection only serve to diminish the value of the masterpiece in people's eyes? Can you see that? And that the only thing that comes to it now is nothing but disrespect. Our bodies and the way that we present ourselves to the world are just like that masterpiece. When we dress and we carry ourselves with modesty, we're signaling to other people that we recognize our inherent worth and that we expect to be treated with the utmost respect. Folks, modesty is not about hiding ourselves from other people's eyes. That's not what it's about. Modesty is about honoring ourselves. And it is about setting boundaries for other people. And it is about reflecting to others and telling other people, here is self-respect and dignity. Now, navigating this subject of modesty can be kind of challenging. We might call it a hot button topic where people are really hard on one side and really hard on the other, and the middle ground is hard to find. Some would say, well, it's a gray area, things like that. So it's a challenging subject, I think, and trying to navigate through it and just want to do what's right. And immodesty has always created problems for the church ever since her beginning. And we know this to be true because in the New Testament, we find passages that explicitly talk about it. 1 Timothy 2 and 1 Peter chapter 3. And so while the names and the places and the faces of the church have changed, the problem of immodesty and how to properly exhibit modesty has not changed. Like, that's a thing that we're always going to have to deal with. And so we got to have, as Christians, we got to have the right mind about this. And we got to know how God would want us to live and how God would want us to teach on these kinds of things. Now, is it a cultural thing? Is modesty a cultural thing? Well, some say it is. They'll say, well, you're reading things out of the Bible or whatever. And say, well, look, look, sir, those definitions and those commandments and those principles and those rules or whatever, you see, all of that was for the culture of the day. And this is a big argument for a lot of different stuff. Well, that's just the culture in the Bible there. And you see, Chuck, things have changed since then. 2,000 years have gone by. Different places in the world, even right now, they view things differently. Everybody defines modesty in a different way, and you can tell it from the culture. Okay. And I would say that view holds for biblical things like washing the feet, right? That came up not long ago, and I think it holds for giving each other a kiss, right? Greeting each other with a kiss, right? That's Romans 16:16. Greeting one another with a holy kiss. All right, I think that cultural thing holds for things like that. It doesn't work with modesty. And here's why. I'm going to give you 4 reasons why it doesn't work. Number one, we just can't brush aside that we have a standard to conform our views and behavior to. And what's that standard? It is the Bible, all right? A particular culture, whether I live in that culture or not, is not the standard that I need to conform my views and behavior to. Many people are celebrating Easter today. They celebrate it as a religious holiday and whatnot. You wouldn't have a clue who Jesus was or what he did without the Bible. The Bible is important. And so, especially the New Testament, to honest Christians, this Bible, the standard, means something to our views and to our behavior. Okay, so here's number 2. Why the cultural thing don't work. From 1 Timothy 2, verses 9 and 10, and 1 Peter chapter 3, verses 3 and 4. I'm not going to read those. But from those passages, we learn that modesty is rooted in 3 things: humility, self-control, and a desire to please God. Humility, self-control, and a desire to please God. Those 3 things transcend culture. No culture, I don't care where you are, no culture is exempt from humility, self-control, and having a desire to please God. All right? Number 3, just because something is culturally normal or culturally accepted, doesn't it always mean that it just happens to align with God's standard? Here we go again with the standards. Just because the majority accept it doesn't mean that God accepts it. And we can go all the way back to Genesis 3 to see this now. So here, what happens in Genesis 3? Adam and Eve, they sinned. They became aware, we ain't got no clothes on. We're naked. And so what do they immediately do? Sew fig leaves together, they sew some coverings, right? God then comes along and he gives them other clothing that cover them a whole lot more. Now, regardless of whether or not you think that Genesis chapters 1 through 11 should be read literally or figuratively, you must agree that those chapters teach something or they wouldn't be there for us. And what you find in chapter 3 is God replacing man's idea of proper clothing with his own idea of proper clothing, which covered him up a whole lot more. Now, why did God do that? Because God has a higher standard than we do when it comes to covering up and modesty. Here's the 4th thing. Why the cultural argument doesn't work with modesty. The teaching that we ought to be presenting ourselves to other people as servants of Jesus Christ by clothing our bodies in a way that professes godliness, that's a moral issue. It's a moral issue. That's an issue of the heart. And God has never changed his view. He's never changed his word on how he wants his people, well, all people, but especially his people, to morally behave themselves. That is universal. It is timeless, and it is purposeful. Modesty certainly included in those things. Now, can we at least admit that our dress, the way we dress, combined with our actions, affect other people? Certainly, we can all agree with that. We might not even agree with everything, but we can agree. We ought to be able to agree with this. It's no mystery that our clothing, our dress, says something to other people about who we are, about ourselves. Clothing sends messages. There's a reason why prostitutes wear what they wear. They are sending a message to all who see them. Proverbs chapter 7, pretty much the whole chapter, starting in verse 6, and go all the way in, talks about a man who is, quote, devoid of understanding. And this man, he takes the path to a certain woman's house, that kind of woman. Verse 10 says, and there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. Well, why do you think she wore that attire? We don't have to have a commentary on that. In 2 Kings chapter 9, in verse number 30, Jezebel got news that the new king was coming into town. Well, what do you think Jezebel did? The text says she put paint on her eyes and adorned her head, maybe with a beehive, and looked through the window. Why did she do all that? Because she knew, and so do all of us, that the way we look and the things we wear send messages. And yes, the way we look and the things we wear also send unintentional ones. Now, no one should be denying that clothing can create sexual temptations, about lust, in the mind of other people, causing others to sin. All right, now let me say this. Certainly, every single man on the planet needs to be exercising self-control in this area. Great verse, Job 31, verse 1. Job says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Every man should know that verse. And why don't you know about that verse? Well, now you know about it. I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? That's some pretty good advice and a pretty good example to follow. Men must work at strengthening themselves to the point where we can look at a woman and not lust after her in our heart. You can get there, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to be strengthening yourself to that point if you're not there already. But come on, isn't it a two-way street? Women and men have the responsibility to not dress in such a way that would sinfully tempt the opposite sex. This argument that, well, if a man's got a problem with what woman's wearing, then he just shouldn't look. That argument is so old and so tired and so weak. I can't stand it. Look, I don't know if y'all realize this or not, but we live in something called a shared society, right? You live in a shared society. And in any shared society, all people are expected to consider how their actions may affect other people. Isn't that right? And you don't need the Bible to know this. You don't need the Bible to be able to come to this understanding. If your neighbor just loved to blare loud music, I mean loud, at 1 a.m. every single night, do you think it would be reasonable, logical for him to ask you to simply wear headphones to cancel out the noise? You would be okay with that? I don't think you would. Now, aside from common sense, this idea, well, men just need to learn how not to look. This idea completely ignores it. I think that's true. Men should learn how not to look and lust. I agree with that. But the idea, if that's all there is, that's not it. The idea completely ignores God's call to moral standards for everybody. Everybody. There is a way that God wants us to show ourselves to the world. And his thoughts about it ought to matter to everybody, to every individual. You name the religion that promotes individualism. Name the religion, let's say, that promotes hyper-individualism, and you will know that that's the religion that is not the path to heaven that goes through Jesus Christ. And of course, there's only one. Look, whether somebody's looking at you or not, you have an obligation as a Christian to adhere to what God says about modesty. True or false? You tell me. Jesus says, whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to sin, it would be better for him if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because of offenses, for offenses must come, but woe to that man, that person, by whom the offense comes. Matthew 18, 6 and 7. Jesus taught there that nobody should be acting in such a way that would tempt somebody else to sin. How in the world does that passage not apply to immodesty? Tell me. Oh, parents, my beloved parents, and I'm included in that, by the way. I am a parent. We need to make sure that we take the lead in teaching our children about modesty. Please don't let their school teachers have to do it, or their Bible school teachers, or even the preacher, although he needs to be preaching on it. Don't let the elders have to do it. Don't let their classmates teach them about what's modest and immodest, and don't let their friends do it. Parents, take the lead. Way too many parents are becoming pushovers in the eyes of their own children. Some parents act like they are the ones who are going to be disciplined by their children if they don't let their children do what they want. That is backwards. We need less of that, and we need more parents putting their foot down about what is worn by their children who is still living under their roof. I thought I heard amen. So what exactly should we be teaching our children about this? To our daughters, we need to be teaching our daughters to dress modestly. Not because, well, every boy just not going to be able to control their thoughts or actions, so they dictate everything you wear. No. We teach our daughters to dress modestly because their worth is far above rubies. Proverbs 31 and verse 10. And her looks and her behavior should invite respect for her and nothing less. Our boys, our sons, yeah, you got to dress modestly. And you need to be viewing every single girl as God's greatest creation and have the highest of respects for their thoughts, their concerns, and their bodies. And then we need to be teaching both our daughters and our sons that sexuality is something that is God-given. It's normal to look and to see something that produces a feeling, okay? But those feelings can be properly controlled and properly expressed in ways that God intended. Now, what about some ways to be immodest? If you didn't know, too short, too low, too sheer, and too tight. Pretty good little checklist. Too short, too low, too sheer, too tight, which I think that's the one that we just can't, I don't know why we can't figure that one out. Look, there are just some things that people don't want to see, no matter what the internet tells you. Not every man wants to see a woman's cleavage. Not every man wants to see every single possible curve that she has on her body. Perverts do, but not good men. Not every lady wants to see a man in his medium tight shirts. And I'm not kidding, may the whole of heaven help us if the next fad that comes along is men wearing yoga pants. I am not kidding. It's already bad enough with ladies wearing it. Don't think that craziness can't happen. You see how crazy we are already. Look, some things are for the bedroom only. Some things are for your mirror only. And some things are just for a husband and wife to see only. Did you know that location doesn't determine the definition of modesty? It is obvious that lots of folks think that a particular location or a particular event okays some clothing that you normally wouldn't wear elsewhere. At sporting events, well, all of a sudden, immodesty is the norm, and you find it definitely on the court and definitely in the stands. Cheerleaders, argue the point that cheerleaders dress immodestly. Disagree with that. And I've talked to y'all about that particular profession as cheerleaders get older, and if they were to follow that profession, the kind of exploitation that happens with these girls, these women. The Summer Olympics. I like the Olympics, but I don't like watching half-naked people run around. The Summer Olympics are getting closer and closer and closer to the original games that started in Greece where they all ran around completely naked. And has no one seriously asked, have you never wondered, or you have never seriously asked yourself why women tennis players wear such short skirts? You really think that it's to make them more athletic? You've never asked why volleyball players, women volleyball players wear those tiny, tight shorts? You've really never thought about it. Why do you think that that has become the norm? For the women only. Because guys don't do it. And what exactly is the Christian parent's response to those things? Just make it right in your head and justify it, because I honestly don't know what the response would be. I've never heard it. Justify it, I'd love to hear it. But if it's true, and this is what always happens, that Christian parents say nothing at all, then they've already said everything. And things need to change. Why is it that when warmer weather moves in, modesty moves out? Why is it when there's a body of water nearby, all bets are off and then some? What about our weddings? Why is the most beautiful occasion does the modesty come out in weddings? Why? In the wedding dresses. There's a friend of ours, always, when she was engaged, dressed modestly. Never thought twice about it. I always thought she looked good. She wore nice things. And she was totally modest. But when wedding day came around, I'll never forget it. It's like seared in my head. I showed up and I was like, whoa! I mean, everything was just out about. Why? Just because you get married? What makes that right? None of the places that I've mentioned or the events that I've mentioned change the definition of modesty, do they? I think here's some questions we could ask ourselves. So I get dressed and I'm ready to go out. If you have to ask questions, if you're wondering, here's some. Can I stand, walk, sit, kneel, bend over in this clothing without undue attention coming to myself? Can I do that? If I can't do that, maybe I shouldn't wear it. Does my clothing emphasize certain body parts or areas of my body that would tend to provoke lust in the mind of other people? Well, then, yes or no? Maybe I shouldn't wear it. Does my clothing stir up admiration and respect for me? Or when I go out wearing this particular thing, does it prompt a lot of opinions about my character? Would my clothing suggest to other people that I have an abundance of or a lack of upright, godly morals? What kind of influence is my clothing going to have on those people who are not Christians who see me every single day? And what kind of influence will my clothing have on those who are Christians with whom I worship with every week? And maybe some people don't like this question, but would I wear this if Jesus Christ was right there standing next to me? Would I still wear what I'm wearing? Now, let me repeat this, and if I could do it 1,000 times before everyone just leaves the building, I would. I want to be clear about it, though. Men can be just as guilty of immodesty as women, okay? Christian men certainly do not need to be encouraging improper clothing. I think one of the biggest reasons for all the immodesty that we're seeing today is the demand for it. People didn't want it, probably wouldn't see all of it. And you know who's driving it? Men. Both men and women need to be in constant remembrance of how to act and how to appear before one another in a respectable and godly manner. And if we get back to the idea, this is for Christians only, but if we get back to the idea that we're truly a family, that we're actually God's children, then I think then doing this, getting this mindset is just going to come naturally for us. So immodesty is tearing up the world, and if we let it, it's going to tear up the church. And I hope that our leadership here is strong enough to not let that happen. Jeremiah spoke of a time when the people were not at all ashamed of their actions, and they were doing all kinds of ungodly things. And he says in Jeremiah 6:15, nor did they know how to blush. Do you understand what that means? They didn't even know how to blush. Nothing embarrassed them anymore. We can easily lose our sense of shame. And so things that, were once unthinkable will now become tolerable. And we forget how to blush. That's not good. If we start to disregard God's word about what God says about these things, we are, in effect, we're rejecting God. In 1 Samuel 8, Israel wanted a king. And you know why they wanted a king? Because they wanted to be like everybody else. That's how awful. What a bad, sorry reason. They wanted to be like all the nations around them. And 1 Samuel 8, verse 7, the Lord said to Samuel, basically said, just listen to the people, give them what they want. Heed the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them. And there are congregations in the Lord's church who are doing that very thing, not only with immodesty, but a whole lot of other things. Let's not be that congregation. Let's not be one of them. So here's what happens. We kind of let things slide. Leadership don't say anything. And we let things linger. And we just kind of get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And we let our guards down, and we don't take the faith seriously. And then when random preacher gets up to talk about biblical morals and biblical teachings, and including modesty, what happens then is, resentment starts to set in. Poor preacher, but resentment starts to set in towards what God has to say about those particular things. And that's not good. In the book of Acts, chapter 22, in verse 22, Paul is there, he's under arrest, he's giving his defense before his Jewish brethren, and he tells them that, look, Jesus Christ is sending me to the Gentiles. And the text says they listened to him until this word. Oh, you don't talk about Gentiles like that. And they raised their voices and said, away with such a fellow from the earth, for he's not fit to live. Well, what did Paul do? He's just telling the truth of the matter. He's actually just saying, this is what Christ told me to do and where to go. That's all he was doing. And they basically said, off with his head, pretty much. Why? Because the people's heart had already turned cold. Let it not be us. Let it not be us. Back to that masterpiece. How do you present yourself to the world? And I'm talking about all the time, not just on Sundays. Sometimes people got a problem with Sundays. But how do you present yourself to the world? Do you present yourself as someone who knows their self-worth? Do you present yourself to the world as someone who demands respect? Or you let the world see you as someone who has no boundaries at all, doesn't care about yourself, who invites disrespect, and you give off the impression that people can walk all over you. Which one is it? We're supposed to have lights. We're supposed to be lights that shine to the world and lets people know who we are, right? In all modesty. Let our lights to the world be preserved and decent and respectable. Hope we agree on that. Never lose the ability to blush. Have we lost it already? Have we lost it already? Let us show good judgment, not in just what we wear. Remember, this goes deeper. This goes down to the heart. Not in just what we wear, but let's show good judgment in all the decisions that we make. Let us show godliness in our lives. And at the same time, let's be fully devoted to God when we're thinking about how we should dress. Let's remember to have respect for other people and, most importantly, respect for God. Thanks for listening. The invitation is open if you need to respond to it. If there's any question you have, you want to talk further about this subject, of course you know I would be available for you any time of the day. But we want someone, if there's anyone here that hasn't obeyed the gospel, we want you to be saved and go to heaven. So I hope you talk with us afterwards. Someone, any Christian with sin in their life, is modesty a thing? It might be the thing. It might be the one thing for you that you struggle with. You're sinning. You're causing others to sin. You realize it now. You want to fix it. You want to make it right. Well, if you can do that all by yourself, then, more power to you. We'll pray for you. But if you need to talk about it, you want help with it, have you sinned in such a way you need to repent, then I hope you take advantage of the opportunity. Grab our songbook, stand and sing together.